Hi, I'm Jared Levinson. I'm here with my co-host Bill Uren and our special guest today from veteranscorp.org, Jim Mingy, and welcome to another episode of VETS TV brought to you on MCTV, Channel 15 in Easton, Maryland. Today we're going to talk about opportunities for veterans to get into small businesses with the assistance of the VA and also state of Maryland funding. Our special guest today is Jim Mingy, who heads an organization, veteranscorp.org, which is designed to help veterans get into the VA system and learn their way around the system to build a small business for themselves, particularly through the use of franchises. Jim, could you tell us a little bit today about what Veterans Corp is doing and what your goals are for this project?
Sure. Again, the name of our organization is veteranscorp.org, and the mission is to help veterans who are seeking opportunities in entrepreneurial ventures. Now, that may be any kind of business, but what we try and do is make them understand what the resources are here on the Eastern Shore. You have organizations of support that are called Small Business Development Centers, SCORE, some of the banking institutions. There's a state loan program here that offers $50,000 no interest loans from the state of Maryland. And that's very interesting. A lot of people don't know about that. They also don't know, the veterans don't know how to interrelate with these particular resources. You know, if, for instance, if a veteran's coming out of the service, there's a program called Patriot Express, which makes a veteran eligible for a loan up to $500,000. But in point of fact, it's offered with a guarantee from the SBA, which is actually the Small Business Administration. SBA is the acronym.
Now, Jim, could you tell us, in your experience, how many veterans are aware of this program, and how did you become aware of all the plethora of things that are out there in the system to help veterans start a small business?
Well, most of my career, I've been an entrepreneur, so I've been involved in starting businesses, including getting guarantees from the federal government, including trying to get bank loans and even raising investment capital. Most veterans that are coming out of the service are unaware of this. I mean, I've been at this 30 years, so you get a little bit of experience, and some of us older veterans need to show people how you put these pieces together. When they're coming out, they do get what they call a course in TAP. And what TAP is a transitional assistance program. And it's involved in showing people how to connect with jobs, but also opportunities. Unfortunately, on the opportunity side, there's not a lot of people with in-depth experience on telling them what direction, what sort of plan, or what sort of consistency they need to get through it. So they can go to their Small Business Administration, they can go to SCORE, or they can go to what are called Small Business Development Centers, which are great resources. Our organization tries to tell people what they're good for, these organizations, how they can help them, but also the sequence of them. What they may need one resource now to understand it, and then they need to do something before they even go back to that resource to make it valuable to them. One thing, for instance, that veterans coming out are not very aware of, if they're disabled veterans, there's a program under the Veterans Administration called the VOC Rehab Program. And interestingly, it has a program that allows someone to go towards self-employment. It offers substantial resources for training and equipment.
By point of reference, how many veterans across the country have actually gone through that program in an average year?
I would just do some testimony a couple months ago, which showed that less than a couple hundred people had gone through this program, simply because they were unaware of it. I think it's becoming more prevalent, but especially since we're at a period now where we're trying to create more jobs. But that's a very limited amount of veterans who are made aware of that.
Let's talk a little bit about the challenges that veterans face as they get into a program like this, and Bill can address this as well from his own experience. What's it like to come out of, say, combat experience or service generally, and begin to approach this issue of going into business and working with this plethora of state and federal resources? What would one be thinking about or looking at that point?
Well, I think one of the problems that veterans have when they leave like medical facilities like I left, there's very little help they give you as far as planning what exactly you ought to be doing. There's benefits that most veterans and most people are familiar with, and that is things like the GI Bill and things like housing help and things like other entitlement type of programs. But most young people who are 19 years old coming out of the service know very little about forming a business, and that's one of the reasons why we've asked Jim to come and talk today, because I think it's important for veterans to realize that there is a wide variety of benefits available to veterans, and I think Jim has been through this process, and I think it's important for veterans to get a feel for what is available, because the jobs in manufacturing and other things are evaporating. So looking into things like franchises I think is important for veterans, and that's why we've invited Jim to come here and to try to give a kind of rundown on how this operates. And it's again one of these areas that's very tricky to operate in. You need some help, and I think people like Jim can give you help and guide you through these programs. And without this kind of help, I think it's very difficult for the average veteran when he walks
Sure.
out of the hospital to help.
Let me ask you, let's say we get in a time machine and here's young Bill Uren coming out of the Marines, and he's fresh home. What do you do? What's the first thing that you can do? And could you walk us a little bit through the steps that you could take to help, say, a young Bill Uren now home to get involved in a franchise program like the one that you're involved in? Talk a little bit of mechanics and what they would need to know and what they would need to do and what you would be able to offer immediately to someone in Bill's position just coming home at that point.
Sure, I'll talk to this young veteran here about how he might get in business. Bill was in combat, as I was too, and the first thing that happens is if you come out of a war zone, you're probably on adrenaline anyway, and you haven't gotten off it. You may have a great idea to do a business, but you may not be ready. So that's the first thing, to try and take care of yourself and figuring out whether it's time to jump off the cliff in a small business. But let's say that Bill he's got this idea to get into business and he's ready to go, and it's now today. And he calls me up on the phone, and I kind of make an assessment that he's got a pretty good idea here. He may not even be thinking about a franchise. He may be thinking about doing his own donut shop. But I might say to him, well, Bill, you ought to consider maybe doing a franchise. There's a couple that are really worthwhile, and if you start looking into that, it's great. Now, since you have some qualifications because of your services available veteran status, you have some pretty good resources that are available to you. And I would tell them about briefly what they are at the beginning. Things that, I wouldn't be saying that I'm going to be doing all this stuff. If Bill's an entrepreneur, he better be figuring these things out, because he's going to live with the consequences of his decisions. Some of these things that he needs to be checking out is, can I get the resources for this? Will my family support me doing a business? Am I passionate enough to want to really put myself on the line? And we'd go back and forth, maybe over several conversations, and we'd talk about this. And a lot of times the impression is that the individual, which this country is built on, individual entrepreneurism, is responsible to think of everything, to do the plan, to be a lawyer, to be all these things, which they're not. But they don't need to know about those things. So the first thing I say to a lot of people is, let's take it 2 pages. 1 page write down on what you think you want to do. You want to do the greatest donut shop in the world, and here's why you think it'll work in your community. Understand what your market is. If you understand that, then you can take another page and put some numbers down and say, is this okay for me? Do I think it's do I think it's feasible? Because as you move along, you're going to have to convince some people. You might have to convince some of your relatives it's a good idea if you're going to ask them to put some money in, or an investor. You're going to have to talk to a bank and say, is this something that you would finance? And at the end of the day, nobody wants to do a bad transaction. You shouldn't want to do one either. And if you have a situation like Bill would have, where he was eligible for resources, he might go over to the VA, and there's a program over there that's called the VOC Rehab Program that I mentioned before. But he shouldn't be thinking of it as an entitlement. What he has to do is to prove to the VA that his idea is feasible too.
Jim, let's stop right there. We need to take a short break for a commercial message. When we come back, let's talk about what it takes to be eligible, to create a business idea and structure that will be workable and that will get you the kind of financial support and assistance that will allow you to actually start the business and make it a success. We'll be right back after this short message. Thank you.